A few short months ago, he had the established political class on the run. Little sign of the rabble-rouser in Hartlepool today as the scourge of multiple prime ministers dialed down. The self-confessed bad boy of Brexit will not contest any of the 317 seats won by the Tories in 2017.
It's been a difficult decision to make.
But the Brexit Party is still planning to stand in most other seats in Great Britain. That could split the vote in Labour-held seats that voted Leave, Boris Johnson's only viable route to a majority.
The way that we keep Boris Johnson to his promises is we have to start to win some of these seats.
Sources in the Brexit Party and Number 10 denied that a formal deal had been struck. But as Nigel Farage mused over his options on Sunday, Boris Johnson helpfully released this.
We can get a fantastic new free trade agreement with the EU by the end of 2020, and we will not extend the transition period beyond the end of 2020.
And that did the trick. Just over a week after Nigel Farage demanded the scrapping of Boris Johnson's entire Brexit deal as his price for standing down candidates.
He was never going to junk the whole thing. I understood that. But you'll notice about a week ago, I said, look, if you're not going to junk it, let's at least make sure we are leaving next year, and we have to end the commitments to full alignment. And frankly, if he hadn't said what he said last night, that might have been a very different speech.
And Donald Trump, he was saying he hoped that you and Boris would get your act together. What do you think he'll be thinking of this?
Oh, he'll probably think it's good. But he'll probably think it's good because his big fear, which he expressed to me the other week, was that if we go down the route of alignment, it virtually wipes out the prospect of a trade deal with the USA. And now Boris is kind of saying, we're going for a Canada-style trade deal. And so he'd be very, very pleased to hear that. And pleased to think that, you know, with a bit of help from me, that his position looks markedly better than it did this time yesterday.
Facing a potential revolt in his party, Nigel Farage bowed to the inevitable today by scaling back his ambitions. Allies insist this was not an act of weakness. They fully intend to capture Labour Leave voting seats, such as this one in Hartlepool. One aide told me, "We want to hold Boris Johnson's feet to the fire by winning enough seats to ensure that he can only stay on in Number 10 with our support and the DUP's."
Nigel Farage!
For now, the Nigel Farage roadshow rolls on. Tonight in Tony Blair's old seat, though with a relatively low-key feel.
That was Nick Watt, and a full list of candidates in Hartlepool will be released after nominations close on Thursday. So now we know that 317 seats where Conservatives won last time will not face a challenge from the Brexit Party. But what about all the rest? Who is the Brexit Party now taking on? And will it have the effect they desire? James Clayton is here. How much, James, do you actually think this will help the Conservatives?
Well, that's an interesting question, because intrinsically you just assume this is going to really help the Tories. But when you actually drill down into it, it's slightly less clear. If you look at the Brexit Party polling since the summer, you can see that the Brexit Party have really hemorrhaged votes from the mid-20s to the teens, early teens to single figures. One poll put the Brexit Party at 6% this weekend. And if you look at where that support was coming from, back in those halcyon days in the summer, about 5 to 1. So most of the Brexit Party supporters were Conservatives, and almost none of them were from the Labour Party. Now it's about 2 to 1 Conservative-Labour split. So frankly, a lot of Conservatives have just gone back to the Conservative Party. Where might this help the Conservative Party most? Well, if you look at, in particular places, Lib Dem-focused seats, particularly in places like the South West, places like Cornwall North, Devon North, more Brexit-facing seats, you'd expect the Brexit Party to do quite well there. Then if you go further north, the kinds of seats that the Conservative Party won against Labour in 2017, so places like Middlesbrough South, Mansfield, once again, you'd expect the Brexit Party to do pretty well there. It's probably going to help the Tories. But the reason why pollsters aren't sort of, jumping around in excitement at this announcement is because Labour Party are pretty far away from the Tories right now. And as a result, most pollsters think the battlegrounds, the key battlegrounds, are in Labour-held seats. And of course, the Brexit Party are going to be standing in those seats.
So there's a chance that this could actually backfire?
Yeah, there is a real chance this could backfire. If you go back to 2016, Vote Leave, Boris Johnson, Dominic Cummings, they were really afraid. They tried to distance themselves as much as possible, if you remember, from Nigel Farage. They thought that he was poisonous, toxic even, to a whole raft of Leave voters. So they'll be very keen to stop any kind of impression that the Brexit Party are in cahoots with the Conservative Party. But of course, the Labour Party will be doing the exact opposite. So already this afternoon, we've already seen Facebook ads like this one from the Labour Party, clearly trying to place the Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage together. And I think you can expect a lot more of these kinds of attacks going forward.
James, thanks very much indeed. Well, joining us now, the businessman and Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib and the Conservative peer in polls to Robert Hayward. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. And I want to return to where Nick started with this, let's call it an agreement that isn't a deal. Is this starting to make sense of things to you, Lord Hayward? We know that there was a demand from Nigel Farage to have a public clarification of the type of Brexit deal that Boris would endorse. And last night, just before this Hartlepool press conference, there's suddenly a slither of tape that says exactly what Farage wants to hear.
I think it makes sense to some extent, but when one looks at it, 10 days ago, Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson were at each other's throats saying, we cannot do a deal for this reason and for that reason. The ERG have always been close to the Brexit Party, but equally the Tory Party has to be careful. James has just made reference to the seats in the southwest, but if the party appears too close to the Brexit Party, to Nigel Farage's line, then it causes problems in parts of the southeast. So we have probably the most local general election that in my lifetime, where every seat displays different demography, different reactions to different policies. So the Conservative Party, the Labour Party over elements of Brexit, virtually every party bar the Lib Dems face a problem because they have to put different messages to different sets of voters in different parts of the country.
So overall, which is not fair when you've just talked about the localism of this, but overall, would you say it will work to the Conservatives' advantage to be closer to the Brexit Party, even if that means an agreement of some kind?
Not closer to the Brexit Party per se, but to have the absence of the Brexit Party candidates in a number of constituencies will work for the Tory Party, because some constituencies, the campaign can possibly ease off a bit and transfer workers elsewhere. So, but it should not be overdone. We're in incredibly volatile circumstances. We've got still another 5 and a bit weeks to go before the election day. So what we're discussing here on one evening may be very different tomorrow evening, let alone in 5 weeks' time.
That's a very good point. Ben Habib, if this was choreographed, is there further for it to go? Do you think that Nigel Farage might pull out even more candidates?
I don't think
Thursday?
this wasn't choreographed. I think this was a decision that was come to after great consideration by Nigel. Nigel made a very generous offer. The Brexit Party made a very generous offer to the Tories 10 days ago, which was to form some kind of non-aggression alliance where we could win in the Labour seats and we wouldn't stand against them in the Tory seats. And the Tory Party did what it typically does, which is become tribal. It declined that offer. And what Nigel has now done is to put country before party, recognise that what we don't want to do is to have a Labour or Liberal Democrat or some kind of Liberal Democrat.
We heard that in the press conference, if you'll forgive me.
Yeah,
but what we are learning tonight from several sources is that ERG voices and Brexit Party voices were very keen to make something work so that this could be announced in Hartlepool this morning. Now, if that is right, and that Nigel Farage had requested a public statement from Boris Johnson that was then given through Twitter, however, that is the reason that Nigel Farage was able to make the deal he has done.
I'm sure discussions have been taking place, and I'm delighted that Boris Johnson has made the declaration he's made, and I'm sure Nigel took a lot of comfort from that, which enabled us to stand down these 317 PPCs.
So explain to me the logic then of your position. Do you, the Brexit Party, now want to see the Conservatives win a majority?
Well, what we don't want is the Labour Party or Liberal Democrats controlling Parliament as they have done.
Do you want to see the Conservatives win a majority?
What we want is a clean... I'm going to answer your question. What we want is a proper Brexit. We don't believe that the withdrawal agreement will get us there. So we need to have seats in Parliament to make sure that Boris Johnson gives effect to the promise he made last night, which is to be out of the transition period by the end of 2020.
You can see where the logic falls down, can't you? Because either you're worried that you're splitting the Leave vote, which is why we heard from Nigel Farage, who was pulling out of places where the Conservatives were standing, or you're not worried about that and you want the Conservatives to win a majority.
Well, actually...
It doesn't work both ways. If you believe that you're splitting the Leave vote, then pull all your candidates out. And if you don't believe it's doing them any harm, then run 600. It doesn't work both ways.
Paradoxically, I actually don't think it's going to help the Tories at all that we've pulled out of 317 seats that they won at the last election.
It won't help the ones that are trying to get in, who still face the Brexit Party and Labour. Many of the top seats are in Labour-held Leave seats, so it's not going to help them there at all. So, well, you are still splitting the Leave vote.
In the Labour, to the extent that we've got Labour leavers, but there are many fewer Labour leavers than there are Tory leavers. You know, the Labour Party has come out basically in favour of Remain,
there, then?
and so we have to stand. Our focus has always been on the Labour seats. It's always been in the North East, the Midlands and Wales. That's where our focus has been. Nigel's been very open about that.
Some people will say you just had to stand enough candidates to get in the debates, to get yourselves in the party political broadcast, to be enough of a numbers presence to actually get that...
What, to get on this programme?
You're always welcome here, as I hope you know. But there are certain things that depend on the reach of your candidates.
Yeah.
You'll talk us through that, Lord.
Yes, there are certain levels at which you qualify for certain things, as you say, party political broadcasts and the like. And at the last election, and it's worth bearing in mind that UKIP fielded just over 300 candidates, and it was along the same lines of making sure that they qualified under certain circumstances. So again, when one's looking at results, in some constituencies, there were no UKIP candidates last time, so it'll be a repeat again.
With your pollster hat on, is this a coherent offer to the electorate? What the Brexit Party is saying tonight, they're not going to stand in 600, they are going to stand in around 280, because they don't want to be responsible for a second referendum, but they don't quite want the Conservatives to win a majority?
Well, we need to make sure that Boris actually does deliver Brexit. You know, one of the problems about the declaration last night is that Boris said we would be out of the transition period by the end of 2020. That presupposes that we're going to sign the withdrawal agreement. Once you sign that withdrawal agreement, actually you're committed to something that cannot be Canada plus plus, as he described it. So it's very interesting to see Boris making these declarations, which actually don't hold all that much.
Well, either you believe it or you don't. You told LBC last week that the deal wasn't Brexit and it was just Theresa May's deal. And now you're saying that even this
The deal absolutely is not Brexit. The deal most certainly is not Brexit, and I can bore you rigid with why it isn't Brexit.
So the candidates might be back up again on Thursday if you don't get another concession on something.
But what we have to do, what we would have preferred is some kind of understanding with the Tories. That's not coming because they've gone tribal. So what we have to do is put the national interest first, make sure that we don't get Corbyn or Joe Swinson, and then make sure that we've got enough seats
you could just work with
to keep Boris Johnson happy.
Tribal Tory.
Keep him honest, not happy. Keep him honest. Keep him honest.
Well, that's the kind of Freudian slip we welcome on this programme.
Anybody who could describe the Tory party as tribal, as one tribe, hasn't been watching it for the last few years.
30?
Sorry?
30 years.
30 years.
Well, they're brilliant at self-survival. You know, they've come together for survival, haven't they, Robert?
You asked the question. You asked the question about coherence. The message will be received by different voters in different parts of the country in different ways.
Thank you both very much. Thanks for coming in.